Chapter 10, Lesson 3 is going to be on the types of compounds that you can find inside cells. So they're called cellular compounds. Let's begin and let's see if we can't make this a little bit more of a reasonable lesson than the last one. All right, as a quick review, we are going to be using several of our old vocabulary words. They begin with atoms. Atoms are the smallest, most basic unit of all matter. There are things smaller than atoms, but those by themselves cannot make matter. Atoms are going to be connecting later. Elements are the types of atoms. So we're going to be looking at the types of atoms that are in elements, and that's going to help us classify these compounds. Molecules are when you get two or more atoms chemically joined. They can be of the same kind or they can be different kinds, but either way, if you have two or more atoms combined, that's called a molecule. And then finally, or not finally, compounds are a type of molecule that has at least two elements in it. So if all of the atoms in a molecule are the same element, it is not a compound. If you have at least two elements chemically joined, then you do have a compound. Finally, for real this time, we've got chemical energy. This is when energy is stored in chemical bonds. So when atoms connect to make molecules, those connection points store energy. We call it chemical energy. In order to release that energy, a chemical reaction must occur. We are going to be focusing on mostly organic compounds. The easy giveaway is to look for carbon. Organic compounds always contain carbon. Now, the book will say and hydrogen. That's 99.9% of the time true. But I have to throw in the word usually because there are examples of organic compounds that do not contain hydrogen. But carbon is the dead giveaway. Look for carbon. Organic compounds are associated with living things. When scientists are looking at other planets and they're looking for possibility of life on another planet, they are looking for evidence of organic compounds. And that means that they're looking for carbon-based molecules. Organic compounds, because of the nature of carbon, can get ridiculously large. Organic compounds can be literally thousands of atoms all connected to each other in one giant molecule. Carbon absolutely loves itself. Carbon loves carbon, and carbon will form very long chains of carbon, and then with hydrogen and other elements branching out from that. There are four main organic compounds that we are going to be taking a look at, and your quiz is going to be about the four main types of organic compounds. But first, let's see if you can pick out the organic compounds. Remember that you are looking for compounds that have the element carbon. These are the ones that contain the element carbon, and these three that are circled are organic compounds. The three that are not circled are not organic compounds because they don't have carbon. The first organic compound that we are going to explore are carbohydrates. These have two main jobs. Their primary job inside a cell is to supply energy. When we talk about cells digesting food, most of the time that we are looking at carbohydrates that they are digesting. Uh, Carbohydrates can also be used in cell structure construction, and we'll take a look at a couple of those. So, when you read nutrition labels, we're actually going to look at a few of our organic compounds. And so you can see on both of these nutrition labels, you can see carbohydrates. And listed under carbohydrates are things like fiber and sugars. And these are, just energy sources. So, carbohydrates are an energy source as a primary role. Glucose is a sugar molecule. And as I mentioned, carbon loves carbon. So if we look at this diagram on the left, we can see that even though it's kind of twisted and bent, there's this long carbon chain that starts up at the top and then goes down and then follows around. So you can actually connect all the carbon atoms together. This is often referred to as the carbon backbone. Carbohydrates can be used in construction of cell structures. Here we have a section of a cell membrane. Cell membranes, as I note there at the top of the screen, contain some carbohydrates, but membranes are mostly other compounds. So if you look at this diagram, there are carbohydrate chains in there, but visually you can see that most of the membrane is made up of something called lipids and proteins. The cell wall, on the other hand, is almost entirely carbohydrates. Um, we can see pectin, and the over on the bottom left, you can see the word cellulose. Cellulose is a carbohydrate, and it is the main component inside a cell wall. Um, so cell walls are mostly carbohydrates and a few other types of compounds. So cell wall and cell membrane are kind of opposites as far as their construction. Cell walls are primarily carbohydrates. The second example of organic compounds that we will explore are lipids. Lipids do not mix well with water, and because of that, they are a major part of cell membranes. The cytoplasm is mostly water based, and so if you want to separate a structure from the cytoplasm, it's good to use a lipid as your membrane because lipids don't mix with water at all. Mostly under the category of lipids, we have what we call fats and oils. There's other things like cholesterols and other substances, but when you think of lipids, think of fats and oils. Now, fats and oils have way, way more energy than carbohydrates do. And the big idea I need you to know is that lipids have more energy because they are bigger molecules. Because they're bigger molecules, they have more bonds. And the more bonds you have, the more chemical energy you have. So, in this, to represent this visually, let's take a look at a carbohydrate molecule versus a lipid molecule. On your screen right now is a carbohydrate. You can see that carbon backbone running right down the middle, and elements like oxygen and hydrogen branching off on the side. Now, we're going to bring up a lipid molecule. And remember, lipids are bigger, so they have more bonds, and therefore they have more chemical energy. Boom. Way more bonds. Lipids, as I said, are ridiculously large molecules, and so they have way more chemical energy. This is why, nutritionally speaking, you are told to eat less fats than carbohydrates because fats have way more energy stored in them. In 3D models, you can see that these lipid molecules can get very, very large. Uh, as I mentioned before, lipids are very good at making membranes because they naturally repel water. Um, the what you're going to see time and time again is a diagram of a membrane, and we're going to call it a lipid bilayer. We can see over here on the right, we can see the term lipid bilayer. The prefix bi means two, and so this means it is a double layer or two layers of lipids. The lipid bilayer is going to be often represented by these circles and then these tails. Now, the lipid bilayer always has the tails facing inwards. Um, and so the tails are where water would be attracted to. So by facing them inwards, water can't get through this. So yeah, you will see this double layer of lipids, lipid bilayer, represented in a lot of diagrams over the next couple of weeks. The third type of organic compound is proteins. They have a enormous range of functions in living organisms. The proteins themselves are made up of smaller molecules called amino acids. So if you can take molecules called amino acids and start linking those together, you can create proteins. So because proteins are molecules made out of other molecules that have been connected, proteins are also very, very large molecules. Proteins are have the job of being building blocks of many, many structures inside a cell, but they also control chemical reactions. There's a category of proteins called enzymes, and enzymes are responsible for nearly every chemical reaction that happens in a cell. Uh, Here we have the construction role of proteins. As I told you, there on the right, you can see the lipid bilayer. So these red double layers of lipids are the cell membrane. And then proteins can be lodged into that for extra support and strength. If you go to Google Images and you type in the word protein molecule, you're going to see a lot of things that look like this. Um, Proteins, because they are molecules made out of other molecules that have been linked together, are very, very, very large. And so to take up less space inside a cell, they need to twist and bend themselves into very particular shapes. Each type of protein has its own shape. And what scientists have figured out they can do is use computer imaging to map the shape of each protein. So you will see diagrams that look like this or something that looks like this. This is just us mapping a protein and its very particular shape because proteins are bent and twisted in order to save space inside a cell. Uh, a category, as I mentioned earlier, of proteins are enzymes, and enzymes can cause chemical reactions, and the chemical reactions can do one of three things inside a cell. They can join molecules to make bigger molecules. So when amino acids are linked together to make a protein, it's enzymes that help do that. They're joining molecules to make bigger molecules. Enzymes can also break down large molecules into smaller molecules. And then an interesting one is that enzymes can take two atoms, or sorry, they can take two molecules and rearrange the atoms between those two molecules. And that actually, in effect, changes both molecules to create two new substances. So every enzyme has a very particular shape, and it can only cause a chemical reaction if the molecule that it connects to has a matching shape, like a jigsaw puzzle. So we can see that this is an example of an enzyme breaking down a larger molecule. So on the left, we can the enzyme matches the shape of the substance and causes that separation point. And then when the enzyme releases, now you've got two smaller molecules that were once one larger one. Here's kind of a better example of that. So the substrate over there on the top left is the bigger molecule, and it's got a very particular shape. The enzyme has a shape that can match that. If the enzyme doesn't match, then just no chemical reaction will take place. When the enzyme and substrate connect, a chemical reaction occurs, and in this case, it weakens the green molecule. And then on the right side of the screen, you can see that the enzyme has broken apart the larger green molecule into two smaller parts. Here we have an example of a enzyme creating two new substances by rearranging atoms. The two substrates kind of connect together, but nothing will happen unless they are also bonded with an enzyme. So on the left, we can see two substrates that fit together, but a chemical reaction can occur. But when the two substrates join with the enzyme, then a chemical reaction can occur. And if you look at the right, you can see a piece of the blue has been given to a piece of the tan. So by the tan piece getting a little piece of the blue molecule, it's now a brand new substance. And the blue substrate, because it lost atoms, is also a brand new substance. All right. Our last type of organic compound are nucleic acids. They only have the job of storing coded information. The cell needs a lot of instructions to do all of its jobs, and it's the nucleic acids that store all of that instructions. Um, all of the activities that happen inside a cell happen because of the directions that are laid out in the nucleic acids. So DNA is an example of a nucleic acid. In fact, the N and the A in DNA are for nucleic acid. The D, in case you're curious, is deoxyribose. So DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid, but the N and the A is for nucleic acid. You will see often DNA represented as this twisted ladder shape. The sides of the ladder are the sugar bases or the sugar phosphate backbone, and the connecting pieces or the rungs are where all this information is stored. So these A's, T's, C's, and G's, these are all the codes that DNA stores, and by rearranging these letters, we can create instructions for a cell to follow. But this twisted ladder shape is how you best recognize a nucleic acid. There are certain days where Google celebrates the kind of mapping of DNA and its structure, and the ladder in this picture is untwisted, but we can see those A's, the G's, the C's, and then U in this case actually is for RNA. So this is actually more of a diagram of RNA instead of DNA, but the NA stands for nucleic acid. Here we have the twisted ladder shape. Again, if you see this twisted ladder, you need to think of nucleic acid. All right, back to our nutritional labels. We can see that 3 out of the 4 organic compounds are listed on all the foods that you eat. We can see fats, which are lipids, cholesterols, which are also lipids. We can see carbohydrates, and we can see proteins. The only thing that they really don't list on nutrition labels are nucleic acids because we don't need them too much for nutritional purposes. All right. Nearly all of the chemical reactions in living organisms take place in the water or cytoplasm of the cells. So, water is responsible for many, many things inside a cell, but one of the primary ones is as a place for chemical reactions to take place. Your book will have a section on water and its responsibilities. There's actually 4 things you need to know um, uh, that water does for a cell, and there will be a quiz question on that. So make sure that you read the section on water. All right. So, as far as big ideas to wrap up this lesson, because we're at the end, there are 4 main types of molecules found in cells. Um, uh, Now we can kind of connect to what we previously learned about the organelles and what their jobs are. So there's actually 2 structures or organelles that can make proteins for us, and whether it's proteins for construction or proteins that are enzymes, we have 2 organelles that handle that. And then which organelle is going to make the carbohydrates and lipids? You should be able to know that by now. And you also can now know which organelle is going to make the nucleic acid. So all 4 organic compounds need to be made in the cell, and they have certain organelles that each have that job. All right, read pages 350 to 355, answer all the questions, and good luck to you.